I wanted to sort of take you back further really about how Liz got involved with coaching in school, which goes before working with our Year 6 pupils. A couple of years ago now, in 2012, the governors and myself invited 2 primary advisors to come into school and basically do a mini offset inspection. It had been a couple of years since we'd had our May 2010 offset inspection, and we wanted to sort of have an audit really. So we invited Janet Ross and Jenny Earlham, those of you who might know those colleagues, into the school to do a complete look at the school, the warts and all. And one of the things that came up from the report was they had concerns, and you can see from the quote, from the visit note, about the way teaching assistants tended to close down activities, and you might be familiar with that in your own settings, and that teaching assistants were tending to give leading questions and were also in many ways guiding the pupils to the answer too quickly. And that was a common theme that was coming up. It wasn't there totally with all teaching assistants, but it was a concern. So one of the things that the leadership team and myself discussed was, well, what are we going to do about it? Do we send people out on training? That's very costly. What's the best way of dealing with looking at supporting our teaching assistants? And at the same time, the Sutton Trust report came out, which I'm sure many of you have seen, which in many ways raised a lot of concerns about the lack of impact teaching assistants had in classrooms in terms of thinking about outcomes and standards of achievement. So the decision we made in November 2012 was to look at our CPD budget and to actually invest in our teaching assistants having some longer term coaching. So we invited Liz and another colleague into school, and we arranged for 3 days, or 1 whole day and 2 half days of coaching to take place. And all the teaching assistants came out of classes. It took a bit of organisation with our statement of pupils, and they went through training of coaching skills, and then there was a time when they expected to practice those coaching skills, and then there was another input, and there was a third input. And one of the things that changed radically was the way in which our teaching assistants began to work with children. So I'll give you a couple of examples. One was, rather than going into an activity first of all, they might sit behind the special needs pupils. And also what came up was, why are they always with special needs pupils? Why can't they work with the most able? So rather than a dependent culture, what gradually shifted over time was that the teaching assistants were sitting back and letting the pupils get on and become more independent first, and then they would guide them if they got to the point where they needed some sort of intervention and support. Now, alongside this, other changes started to take place, which to some extent are outside of the remit of coaching, but we also changed the way in which we did intervention groups. So that in the morning, what we do as a whole school is the teachers take the intervention groups, and it's the teaching assistants that do the early morning work, and they also do the dinner money, or not the dinner money, the dinner register and the register. And that actually has made a massive difference to our intervention groups. That's just as an aside. So we had Liz involved. The teaching assistants were involved with the projects. They were coaching children, they were coaching groups. And one of the things that we found as well was that the quality of their questioning really improved, in that they were asking more open-ended questions. They also felt valued in the time that they were given to have that CPD. And then Liz came back, I think it was in the autumn term, Liz, wasn't it? And also in February, just to kind of keep onto the sort of you might say, the front of the cooker, those coaching skills. So what was the impact? Well, one of the things that was significant was that staff felt really valued by the leadership team and by the governors in the investment in time into them, and also together, and having training in-house. And we had Sue Smith, who was the SEN advisor, who's now retired, and she came back and she did a report in July last year, and you can see for yourselves that when she spoke to the teaching assistants, she talked to some children, that there was an impact in the way that the pupils were encouraged to be independent, and were much more confident in the way that they questioned children in detail. And if you'd like to look at the visit note, I've brought it along today. So that's had a massive impact in the way that we have trained our teaching assistants in coaching. And we haven't stopped there. One of the things I've had a discussion with Liz is, in that spiral model, that I aspire to in terms of, you're visiting something from a slightly different viewpoint every time, that in November I'd like Liz to come back and to do a refresher session for our teaching assistants in coaching. So that was the first part, really. But with all these things, you have the unintended bubbling through of new ideas. And one of the conversations that Liz had with one of my senior teaching assistants was, well, if coaching can work for our teaching assistants, what about how we develop our Year 6s as leaders in our school? Could Year 6 become coaches to disaffected or sort of uninterested Year 3s? So one of the projects that started to get underway in the autumn term last year was, how can we train then our Year 6 pupils? So this time last year, Liz and my other senior teaching assistant, Liz Aspin, decided to do a taster session for our Year 6 pupils about what coaching skills involved. And they had to fill in an application form with their parents also writing why they felt that they would be a suitable person to make a coach. And they held formal interviews to which I wasn't involved at all. So they used my room, and the person who was being interviewed, that's one of the Year 6s, actually sat on my chair, which is slightly high, which made them feel very important. And Liz interviewed them. And then in the autumn term, the first part of the autumn term, they taught them and supported with them in the development of coaching skills. And then the quite difficult thing was pairing up the Year 6 with a suitable Year 3. So they went through a couple of rounds of that, I think. And that's been incredibly successful. And I've just got a few examples if you'd like to look at later. There's Imogen, who's one of our current Year 6s, kept a very detailed journal of coaching, so I put one of those along. And where we're at now is, as Liz has mentioned, they've actually filled in their application forms. So the Year 5s have had a coaching session, a taster, and they filled in their application form. So I've actually brought the photocopies along, which just make for delightful reading. You have to read them. And they went through a shortlisting session. So the Year 6s with Liz and my senior teaching assistant also did the shortlisting, and their comments were incredibly insightful. And they're actually this afternoon running interviews in my room. And I think one of the things that I have got from it is, yet again, I am sort of fail in many ways to realise just how perceptive a Year 6 person can be about the support they can give a younger learner and the potential they have for leadership. So that's been a very successful programme. Difficult, I think, to think about what the impact might be, but one of the things I think that has come about was we have got improved pupil confidence, and I think particularly of a couple of children who were often late to school, coming in when I was on the back door, 5 to 9, when the bell's gone at 10 to 9. Those children are not late anymore. Now, of course, it could be to do with something else, and we all know that there's multiple factors that help raise achievement. It's not just one thing. But in March 2014, we had a Challenge Partners review, because our learning community has committed themselves to having Challenge Partners reviews, and the lead reviewer wrote a very positive piece about the impact of our Year 6 coaches, which was very successful and seen as excellent practice should we go through further training. So where are we now? Well, in the autumn term, as I said previously, we'd like to have another review session with our teaching assistants developing their skills further. As previously mentioned, we've got Year 6s interviewing today to carry on pupil leadership and staff coaching. I mean, obviously the staff are involved in different levels of coaching with the middle leadership programme, and I've got a member of staff on the National Professional Qualification for Senior Leadership, where coaching and mentoring is part of that process, and also thinking about parental involvement. And I was talking to Alison earlier as well about thinking about the importance of developing coaching with our mealtime assistants, and maybe doing the same thing with our play leaders and our mealtime assistants, and doing some sort of training on site to help them to develop children's sort of independence and where conflict arises in the playground. So that's where we are with it, really, but it's been an amazing journey and an unintended journey in many ways, in terms of the outcomes being put in terms of formal reports. So, if you've got time, you're very welcome to look at those visit notes, and also the pupils' application forms and the delightful things their parents write about them, their own children, just at the back. So it's been a really, really worthwhile project and totally inspirational.